Put the Big Chungus song. Here's the Big Chungus song. Y'all ready? Ready for this? Here's a Big Chungus. It's a Big Chungus. It's a Big Chungus. It's a property song. It's a Big Chungus song. Yeah.
I don't know why you guys are still watching. I don't want to be watching.
Good morning, Quackhawks. Today we are going to be talking about Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. So if you don't have a copy of Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, I strongly suggest that you look at the local library's website or that you look online to try and find a copy. I'm desperately trying to get you guys access to a digital copy, and as soon as I do, I will give that to you. But I wanted to wrap up our first week of conversations about destiny by introducing this book. We finished up our conversations about Animal Farm. We're smack dab in the middle of our conversations about Of Mice and Men, and now I want to finish those conversations and move into this idea of outliers. Now, the way that Malcolm Gladwell starts the book Outliers is simply by saying, this is the definition of what an outlier is. An outlier is somebody who sits outside of the normal set of data, something that has some sort of extraordinary value that doesn't belong in the normal of what we call society. So an outlier might be somebody like Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, some of the wealthiest people in the world. Those people are going to be outliers. But it also applies to people who are exceptionally healthy. What about the people who live way beyond what we expect a life expectancy to be? Those people are also considered outliers. And so he starts off by describing this situation. There are these people who live in Pennsylvania, and they all seem to have immigrated from this place in Italy, Rosetta. And they got to this point where they had immigrated to this part of Pennsylvania so much that they actually ended up naming that area of Pennsylvania Rosetta. And these Rosettans, the people who lived there, had this strange thing about them. They were dying only of old age. Nothing else. It wasn't heart disease. It wasn't any of the typical stuff, depression, anything like that that would lead to that sort of death. It was only old age. So that was very surprising. They were an outlier to this data. And as people looked at it, they noticed this, that ultimately our beliefs about health, the idea that all of our choices are ours alone and our choices make us healthier or less healthy, were lacking, to say the least. That in reality, that we might have some control over our own health, but the other things that impact us are completely outside of our control. And that's community. So you have these two forces, this idea of ultimately on one side, your own free will, your choices. You woke up this morning, and if you're like me, you ate 2 cookies for breakfast and some black coffee. Not exactly the healthiest move. I did take a walk though, so it kind of balances things out. And I have a good schedule when everything around me seems to be falling apart, so having a good schedule is also a healthy thing. I'm relatively healthy, right? But it also matters what kind of community that you live in. And for the Rosettan people, as Malcolm Gladwell describes it, these people had strong social structures that supported them, that allowed them to thrive. And I talked about this a little bit earlier in the week. Your environment changes the way that your brain works. Your environment helps you or hurts you. And so the choices that you make are also informed by the people that you are around and the things that are around you. Those things can impact you in ways that are completely outside of what you think of as your control. And so those things create outliers. Does your environment currently lead you to the best possible life that you can live? Or is your environment actually suffocating you to some extent? And are your own choices helping you to do the best that you possibly can? Or are your own choices hurting you? At what point do we start saying this is somebody's fault individually and this is somebody's fault from a community standpoint? The community or the structures that are in place are hurting us. Now, a lot of what we've talked about this whole year, when we talked about colonization, when we talked about technology, and when we talked about this idea of fascism, all of those 3 things are systems that are hurting people. We exist within systems, and those systems could be doing a detriment to us. To what extent can we affect those systems? To what extent can we say, through the power of free will, through the power of pigheadedness, I'm not going to let this do this evil thing to me anymore. I'm not going to let this environment continue to hurt me. That's what we're going to be exploring for this rest of the quarter. I'm going to be trying to encourage you guys to test and understand better what you can control and what you can't. So, for today, for this weekend, the challenge that I want to give to you is talk to somebody you haven't talked to in a long time. Maybe talk to a family member that you haven't been able to reach because of this coronavirus. Or maybe talk to a friend that you haven't talked to for a little while. Change your environment ever so slightly. Change the people that you hang around. Change the normal internet cultures that you're a part of. Try to subscribe to a different subreddit. Try to be a part of the Discord channel that we have for the class. Whatever it might be, try to change your environment slightly so that you can change your outlook. And then the other thing is, start something new. Malcolm Gladwell, one of the famous things that come out of the book Outliers is this idea of 10,000 hours. We're going to get into that later on in some of the later chapters, but right now what you need to know about 10,000 hours is essentially anybody can become great at something if they put in the time and the effort. So I want you guys to start on something now. Miss Ely has decided that she's going to start juggling. I have decided that I want to learn a whole bunch of things, but specifically I've gotten into Minecraft. I want you to pick up something that you haven't before, and I want you to try to affect your situation. What is your go-to, your default setting? What is your destiny? How can you fight against it? How can you push against it? How can you change your environment to make your environment more conducive to the best possible life you can live? And how can you make your decisions so your decisions are more conducive to the best possible life that you can live? These two things are going to be balanced out between each other throughout the rest of this next quarter. We're going to be talking about how one affects our destiny maybe more than the other, or how our destiny is a thought that we've came up with because we can't classify how our communities affect us. So when we look at those different things, I want you to think, what do I have control of in this moment? And how can I affect it? Can I paint one of my pieces of furniture? Can I move everything around in my room? Can I take something and throw it away? Can I get rid of my phone for now, or at least get rid of my phone for the rest of the weekend? All of those things affect your environment and what you think of as your normal. I want you to try to take some sense of control and say to yourself, to what extent can I affect my own life? We're just going to start there. You might have noticed that I have the Destiny Project posted. However, the Destiny Project is not due. So I'm not asking you guys to do all of the same steps, but I do want to challenge you and encourage you to do that if you feel like that's something that could help you. I think it would help all of you guys to question how you deal with your own destiny and to write about it, to respond to it. You also heard my challenge about reaching out to friends. That's coming from Of Mice and Men, and it's mostly directed towards my freshmen. But any of you guys that want to take up that challenge, I strongly encourage that you do so. Take this weekend and ask yourself, how can I affect my environment? How can I change the cultures that I'm a part of? Because for Malcolm Gladwell, he realized that the Rosettans in Italy, the Rosettans that came from Italy, were living this amazing life. And the only thing that changed their life was the community that they were a part of. I think many of us look at a community like that and think, man, I wish I could be a part of something like that. Let's make a Rosetta together. You and I, whatever friends we can find. Let's make a community that builds people up, that helps people be the healthiest version of themselves. Help me figure out what that looks like. All right, with that being said, stomp your feet, clap your lap, yada yada, yell quack. Quack!